This episode is sponsored by Victory Grips. Victory Grips are the standard in hand protection, plus they just launched their new gym affiliate program. As affiliate owners, they understand the demands of gym owners. Their goal is to keep their gym referral program process as simple as possible. You'll receive educational content, early access to upcoming releases, and exclusive discounts for your members, plus received a percentage of the net sales. Find out more at victorygrips.com. Welcome to the Power Monkey Podcast, where we chat with the best in the world of fitness about what they do. I'm your host, Dave Durante, with my co-host, Mike Service, and on today's episode, we have the second fittest man in the world coming off an incredible performance at the 2023 CrossFit Games, Mr. Pat Vellner. We've had Pat on in the past, and he's always great to speak to on a variety of different topics. We dive right into the subject of having kids, as Pat is a dad of one, soon to be a dad of two boys, and what it's like to manage not only parenthood, but also two full-time jobs, one as a professional athlete, of course, and the other as a chiropractor. We discuss his upcoming season, as well as some of the things he's hoping to see change for the next generation of upcoming athletes in the functional fitness space. He's an incredible athlete and an even better person. We love having Pat on this podcast, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
All right, Mr. Vellner. I'm coming out of my mentorship, and Dave is letting me start the podcast today. So I want to express my excitement first to be able to do this with you.
All right. Well, look, training wheels off. Hopefully you don't mess it up.
All right. So here we go. As the resident non-father between Dave and I'd like to bring up a little conversation piece. You're expecting, aren't you, sir?
We are, yeah. March 6th. So yeah, expecting the second one, another boy. So, things are busy. It's going to be a busy holiday season.
Yeah, I can imagine. How do you feel, boy number two? Like, I can imagine maybe similar feelings to first one and maybe some new feelings.
I think there's something nice about knowing what to expect to some degree. I think when I've already gotten one little boy, so you kind of, no surprises on that end, at least. You kind of know probably more of the same. But I think we would have been happy with a boy or a girl. It's funny now we talk about family planning and stuff, and I think if we had had a girl on this second one, we probably would have been like, no questions asked, done having kids. But now with two boys, we don't know. So now it's just there's this extra uncertainty that comes with the second boy, where we're like, it's too early to make the decision now. I think you're crazy if before you even have the second kid, you're already planning the next one. It's like, let it settle, figure out how you do with two. And then if three is in the cards, you make that decision, a year and a half later. But now there's just the maybe. We're like, I don't know, maybe we try for a third. We're not sure. But we're pumped. We're pumped to have two little boys. It'll be fun, have brothers. And, I grew up the middle of three boys, so I had brothers growing up. So that's what I try to remind my wife, is if we try for a third, that's what my family did, and we wound up with three boys. So if we're gonna try for the girl, it's risky.
I was just gonna say, I think that that thought process can get you down a slippery slope. I have one of my best friends was like girl number 5 before he ended up getting the boy that they were trying for. And
oh my
every time he was like, no, we're just gonna try, one more time. I mean, I love all my daughters, but it'd be really cool to have a boy. And yeah. I think that number 6 was their lucky number. So
wow. I think the funny ones you hear too are people saying, we'll try one last one, and then they get twins or something on the last go. Yeah. And then it's like, that's just a big bump. And so good for your friend. 6 kids that's a lot of juggling. I mean, I can handle the one now, and the thought of 2 doesn't have me panicked yet. But boy, 6 is you hope that they're raising each other by the time the 6th one gets there.
Yeah, well, the experiences I've had so far are enough. Just trying to like help Dave and Sadie a little bit whenever I hang out with them, and they're 2 girls. And then I guess ironically enough, though, in March as well, I will at least be near a birthing. So the best friend of my wife, she's going to have a daughter, and has asked us to be present for the birth. So
cool.
Maybe you can give me a little, maybe you can give me a little pep talk before that, because I don't know if I'm like, just like there, like outside the door for some moral support, or if I'm like, supposed to have on like my gloves and ready to catch.
Catcher's mitt in hand, Mike. Ready
Stay out of the way.
That's good. Yeah.
So here's the thing on that. Like my wife delivers babies, and I would say from feedback I've heard from her through many, many births. I mean, it's not your wife, it's not your kid, but like, don't be so out of the way so as to be like, there's weird when people are like really uninterested or uninvolved.
Yeah.
Like that's weird. Like it's crazy. Like giving birth is as an amazing thing. So like, I don't know, get involved where you can, but like, you want to not be in the way of the things that need to happen. So I think it's cool to see. It's cool to be a part of. That's a super awesome privilege and cool to be asked that. But yeah, don't be the person who's like disgusted by the whole affair.
Yeah. No, no,
Right? Like that's just like it's
I'm ready.
tragic when you hear about that and stuff. It's just like, oh, you know. So it's cool. It's like that takes a lot, I think, for people to bring you into their circle that close. So they're obviously really great friends, and like be there for them. Do whatever you can. Be enthusiastic and involved. But yeah, if it's time for like whatever, a nurse or somebody to get in, just make sure you're like, let me know where I have to stand. Where's the clear zone? And I'm like,
100%.
I'm good over here. But yeah, you definitely don't want to be in the way of things that need to happen.
Yeah, no, I'm ready to, you know, get in there and get my briefing and rules of engagement. But that's
Yeah,
good feedback for me. So
that's
yeah,
exactly
sure.
right. Like know where you can stand, know where you can do what am I allowed to touch? What am I not allowed to touch? If there's like sterile zones or things like that, like just get read in and then rock and roll in the areas that you have to play with, right? So that's cool. That's really fun. So I hope you enjoy that.
Yeah, I will. I'll keep you updated, Pat. Thank you
Yeah,
for.
What kind of advice were you given? Because we have two little girls, and I think girls are extraordinarily different than boys. From my experience of observing friends that have boys around the same age as my girls, but what advice have you been given about going from 1 to 2? Because people are like, oh, it's double the work, or some people are like, it's only 1.5 times. You figure things out, and you already have a lot of the tools. But for us, the second was personality wise the big change. We weren't prepared for. We're like, oh, if we just have 2 of the same person, we'll be fine. So it's like managing the personality, not just the additional body. Any
totally.
advice you've been given on that?
That's the wild card, right? I don't know. We hope. It's funny too. Like how old are yours, by the way, Dave?
6 and 3, soon to be 7.
Okay. So our oldest now, our first is 2.5 basically, and so they'll be roughly 3 years apart. And he's like very sweet, but he's at the age now where he's a lot to handle. So I don't know.
Three is no joke. The 3-year-olds.
Yeah, I think that with 2 of him, we could manage it. And I think some of that has to do with predictability. So the wild card is definitely you don't know what you get. If I get a more mild tempered another little boy, then terrific. But if you get another one who's really high energy and hands on, then yeah, it can take a lot of work. And I think that there's something to playing even strength like that when you can go 2-on-1 as parents. It's fine. You can hand off and one of you can kind of have a break maybe or reset. But when you have 2 kids, it's not exactly quite as easy. But you've got the infrastructure, right? So you already laid out, you have some of the things. There's not as much, you've accumulated all of the kid things and a little bit of experience. So I think it's less going in blind. I've kind of heard it's not as terrible of a jump from 1 to 2. And I've heard 2 to 3 is like, it's like the same again. It's like, it's actually quite a bit of work to be now outnumbered in your household. But I think that you're right. Like some people, the first ones or the second one's a dream, super easy, and they're just pumped. But some people get the second one in and they're crazy. We were pretty lucky. I think he was good on the like classically hard baby things. Like he was always a pretty good sleeper, never really struggled eating. So some of those early stage entry level frustrations that people have, we kind of avoided. And then now he's like a very busy toddler, which is just.
Is he an athlete?
He's starting to have a little more fun with stuff like that. He's interesting. Like we get him out. He's pretty good at determining what he doesn't want to do, like fear wise. And he doesn't do stupid, reckless things, which I think boys classically sometimes do. So I'm thankful for that. We'll go to the park and he'll climb things or jump off heights, but he'll hit a point where you're like, oh, he jump off this higher thing. And he looks and he's like, nah, I'm good on that one today. And so, yeah, he kind of defines his limitations pretty well now, which I'm thankful from at his age. And we'll slowly break down those barriers as I think he's a little more capable, but he's fine. Like I'm exercising a lot and I'm doing a lot of things with my body around him. So I think he sees it and he's he's at least interested, and he on some level I think understands now that like exercise and going to the gym and training is like my job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny because I also work in a clinic, and so some days I go to work in the clinic and some days I go to work at the gym. And he's, if I'm driving him to daycare or something, and you're like, I'm going to work, he has enough wherewithal to ask now if I'm going to the gym, like, am I working at the gym or am I working at wherever? So it's a big part of our life. So it's fun to see him getting more physical, and I get him doing somersaults and things. He loves, like, I don't know how all kids are. I can only speak to my experience, but growing up, my dad was a diver. And so we did a lot of like acrobatic stuff. And so I remember as a kid, always my dad would have like fun little ways to make you do flips and things like that. And lots of like somersaults and handstands and cartwheels. And it was just always a big part of our lives. And then we got into acrobatics ourselves. But so I just like, I don't know, that's like how you parent, like that's your experience. So I'm like, yeah, that's fun stuff I did as a kid, and I want to do that with him. And so I have lots of little mats around, and we do somersaults, and I get him to do little front flips and back flips and spot him on little things. And I think it's fun, and he likes it. So we'll see. I think he's getting more and more physical. He's a big reader though. He loves reading books, and his language developed super young. So I feel like from the time he's been like 18 months, he's been speaking full sentences and reading, like loves reading books. So we were kind of like, maybe he's a bookworm guy. And then I would say in the last,
reading books.
Yeah,
that's pretty advanced.
I mean, he's not reading himself, but he wants to read all the time. Like I bet you per day, I probably read him 10 books.
Wow.
Like, so anyway, I feel like initially we thought he was more of maybe a bookworm type guy, which is great. So we're like, sweet, cool. He loves reading. That's awesome.
Good combo, like you.
Yeah, in the last 2 months or so, I'd say, or 3 months, he's become a little more. He's starting to develop physically a little more, and just become a little more coordinated and confident. It's like jumping off of heights and wants to do more flips and play outside. And it's perfect just in time for winter, where we're probably not going to be outside in the park quite as much. But we'll see what we can do. And fortunately, we have the little home gym set up, so we can get him in there hanging off bars and stuff and doing something.
Are you guys you making any special plans for baby number 2? This is going to be like open week 1, open week 2, right? For delivery.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, the open doesn't have a lot of value these days and a lot of pressure for me. So the big change will be we're actually moving we live on the West Coast right now, and we're going to move east to try to be close to some family. So we're building a house where my wife grew up, not too far from where her family is, so that we can have some help. Like where we are, we literally live on an island, and we're kind of like, my family is our closest family, and they're a 14-hour drive away and a ferry ride, and or like, so it just, nobody's close, right? And so with the second kid, and we both work, we're kind of hopeful to have a little bit of help, at least available if we need it. So we plan this move, and we're going to go live out east for a while, and that is going to kind of start around then. The build's going to be going on. I think my wife's family is going to come here around the delivery and hang out for like a month to just help us out here, and then we're going to move in the spring, early summer, probably out east, and like kind of couch surf at her parents' place while the build's going on and supervise the build a little bit. So there's a lot of moving pieces there about just getting the house ready to sell, packing up, moving, doing all that stuff. And that's all going to happen kind of around when baby number 2 drops. So it's going to be a busy time in the spring. We're trying to kind of wrap our heads around it now. And as the CrossFit season releases some important dates and things like that, I can kind of plan a little better. But I think there's a good chance we'll stay here pretty much until close to semifinals. And then I'll basically compete semis in the West, and then move, and we'll hopefully have the house sold at that point and stuff. So yeah, I mean, the spring, the baby's going to come, and it's going to be chaotic for a bit. So we're going to have some family help. And I think the open is like the last thing on my mind. We got a lot of other chaos, and I'll show up and do that workout, and it'll be fine. And then, yeah, I'll prioritize for later in the season. It's kind of more family priority time for the spring for us.
I think you're just
like a learning curve. Wait. Is there a learning curve? Because in the US, everything is so regional. Like if you move, when I moved from like New York, New Jersey, California, or Portland, that's a pretty drastic change in lifestyle and personality types. You know, you go to different states, you're going to get a different pace of life and quality of life and all those things. Is Canada the same thing? If you move from the West Coast to East Coast, is it going to be like a learning curve for you, or is it like, as Canadians, we're all kind of the same way, or are you like, oh, it's a whole different lifestyle on the East Coast?
It's like Canada and the US are very similar. We're big countries with a lot of variety from north, south, east, west, right? The one benefit Canada has is there's not a lot of north. Like you don't go much farther north than like yeah, like everybody lives within, 300 kilometers of the like southern border of Canada or something, right? Like we don't go that far north. So mostly the difference is east-west, but it's like, yeah, there's cultural differences and it's based on topography and all kinds of stuff, right? So a lot of it, I think, comes down to size of city. One of the big differences will be where I'm moving is in Quebec, which is like the French part of Canada. So that's quite a significant difference. And they have quite a different culture, and they grip onto their culture very strongly. So I think that there's a kind of like defiant unwillingness to assimilate to other parts of Canadian culture that come out of Quebec. So that's fine. I've lived in Quebec. I went to school there. Like I've done all that stuff. It's fine. Like I think I'm prepared for that, but it's seasonally even very different. Like where we live now, winter is like, it's like Seattle. Like it's like rainy. You maybe get a couple of snowfalls per year that hang around for a little bit, but maybe we get 2 weeks a year where there's really snow on the ground here. And then otherwise it's rain, right? And we have mountains and all this stuff. And I'm going to go there, and it's a little more like upstate New York-y, where you've got fall and you've got seasons and you've got winter and all these other things. So yeah, the people are a little different, but I think there it's a pretty small town, and it's not going to be crazy. I mean, I've lived in Toronto and Montreal and places like that as well. And I think some of the big differences in people comes in cities, and that's just like a pace of life thing, I think. And, the things that people go to cities for. So yeah, I think there's going to be a period of getting used to things. I think getting reused to language, and they have a bunch of laws around language there that I'm going to have to navigate for clinic work and stuff like that. And just uprooting like my licensing from my clinic work to moving there. I have to jump through a bunch of hoops again and change things. So yeah, there's just like, it's all just extra admin, right? Like extra little things on your plate that can kind of add up, but at least we are familiar with that area. It's not us both moving somewhere kind of cold. Like Michelle's family is there. We go there a few times a year. We visit, we have friends there. Like we've both lived in Quebec for long periods of our lives. It's not a huge transition that's like unknown. But yeah, definitely there's a lot of difference for sure. And the West Coast and the East 5 is different.
You'll be close to your coach as well. Is that correct? Is there any benefit? I know you mentioned last time you were on the podcast that you kind of enjoy your training situation of being by yourself and having the separation between you and Michelle. But is being closer at all a benefit for where you are training wise?
I think it's always a benefit. It's nice to have the option. Like I think I'm closer, but I'm not close. I think from where we are, it's going to be a 2-hour drive to Montreal. So what's nice is now, even if we wanted to do a training camp now and then, it's like moving mountains to try to do it. And just logistically for either one of us to have everything align, it's tough. And then it's going to be expensive. Whereas at least then, even if it's only every couple months, it's like, hey, I'm going to pop down for the weekend. We'll do 2 days. We'll touch in, do some things. That's really doable. And I like that, right? Like even my daily training situation, I train by myself, and, I think there's a ton of value to be gained from that. I think periodically it's nice to just have people around. So having the option is just nice to be able to just do it now and then. It can revitalize you a little bit and energize you to have some other bodies around. But I think it can beat you down and wear you down over time if you have that every day and you don't have the discipline to kind of turn it off, which, to be frank, I think most of us at the highest level don't. I think if you're competing and you kind of hit the switch, and it's hard to turn that off. But it's interesting. I mean, I like to be able to be by myself. Currently, my training situation is funny. I have one guy that I train with as like a training partner, 2 guys, I guess. I have one guy locally who comes in on Sundays and trains with me every day on Sundays. just great. One day a week, I get someone to kind of chat with and just train with. And then otherwise, Michelle is coaching another guy, like pretty good semifinals guy. And he lives in like, oh geez, where is he? Louisiana, something like that. And we just text, and we're doing the same stuff, and we'll just kind of, it's like having kind of a little bit of an accountability partner, but they're not physically there with you all the time. It's just like you get little touch-ins. And it's nice. And I had this thought the other day. I shared this with my wife last night, actually. I did like a really hard bike workout in the garage. And the way my day was, I was at the gym in the first session by myself all day and did some like pretty hard stuff, but felt like I mentally, I kept it together really good. There wasn't any drama. I wasn't like falling apart, groaning, doing anything weird during training. And sometimes you do, and it's just mentally like you're exhausted. And it occurred to me that I was like, I think most of the time I've trained a lot in an empty gym, like through the weekends where there's not even the gym's closed. There's not even other people there. And I think most often I'm least dramatic when there's nobody around. And I'm just like, when you have people around, whether you do it consciously or not, there's like a little bit of like putting on a show of like, I'm working really hard. I'm looking for a little bit of,
you're looking for some affirmation there.
Yeah. Validation in what I'm doing. I want somebody to come over and ask like how I'm doing. And it's like, I don't need that, but I think unconsciously you kind of do it. And I've done some really hard workouts where there's like just a class going on or some other people doing some lifting, and you finish a set and you let out a big like kind of yell or something, and you lay down a little harder and you do a more dramatic like rest period pacing. And then I'm like, yesterday I did my stuff. I finished my sets. I sat down, I wrote my stuff. I just sat on my bench. I breathed because there's nobody to put a show on for. And then I'm like, I just got me thinking, I'm like, that's like kind of, and those are the skills that are really good in competition, to be able to just keep that energy in and not waste it. And I thought it was funny. I'm like, I don't see myself as someone who really does a lot of that, but I do it from time to time. And I don't know if it's because because I train by myself so much, I've kind of trained that as a habit to just like, who cares? Like, that's not for anybody. That's for other people, and you don't need to do that. Like, if it's just for me and it's only me and it's just me in the garage, I almost never do it. And like, I'm not going to do a dramatic sit down or let out a yell or a groan, or like, it's just like funny. So I like thought about that yesterday. I was training with this guy, Will, through text, but just like very, very stoically going through my training. And I was like, oh, this is like, and I felt good at the end of the day. I was like, I feel like mentally I felt very in control all day. I performed pretty well all day. I was really happy with all my pieces of training, but I was like, yeah. And I look back, I'm like, some of this stuff was like hard. And I feel like I could have been more dramatic than I was. And I wonder why I wasn't. And then I was like, oh, I think it's just because why would I? Like, who's going to care? And
yeah, you look playing to the crowd, man. I saw you working on your crossing the finish line routines of shooting the guns and the lasso, and you like to play to the crowd. And so if you don't have that crowd there, it's like, man, some of my personality doesn't get to be exposed here. I want to show.
Yeah, and that stuff's different, right? Like that stuff's a little different. But I mean, like, even so, say something like at the games, we did that interval workout, like looking at body language of people between intervals, like, or anytime we've done interval workouts, you see people who are really composed and in control. And like that's kind of a part of it. Like, everybody just did a hard effort, and it's not necessarily beneficial to like come across the line and look tired or feel tired or I don't know. It's just funny. I feel like there's such a big mental component of like, how do you feel about how you feel? Like, so when you're really tired or sore or whatever, and if you can just be kind of okay with that, it's fine. And that's what we get from training. I have another, like, the other day I did a 2K row test. And I did it like cold, and it went miserably. Like, I would say I performed fine, but it was like a competition level effort for a fine performance. And we didn't do any ramp up. Like, normally you'd be doing like do a build up, some phases of training to get ready for something like that, just so you're kind of accustomed to what that pace feels like, what it looks like. And I could tell going into it, I knew what I was going to target as a pace. And I knew that I had not seen those numbers on the rower in probably like 8 weeks. And I was just like, I don't know I'm already nervous going into it. And you start, as soon as I pull like 20 seconds into the test, just looking at the screen, I'm like, those are fast numbers. And like, I don't know if I can do that, but you just try to hang on. And like, already before things had even set in, you're just like, I feel uncomfortable with what I'm looking at, with what I'm feeling. And then you just like, it spirals from there, and you're like, your heart rate gets up a little higher, a little faster, and little things like that that make a difference. So some of that, just like being okay with how you feel or how it looks and being a little bit more composed. That's a hard thing to learn how to do. Composure is not like, I think you get it to a certain degree from just exposure therapy, but it's one thing that, yeah, it just occurred to me recently that I was like, I think that my composure is generally better when I'm by myself, and I train a lot by myself. And I think as a habit that translates over time into performance in competitions. So it's just like, yeah, it was a funny concept I was just playing with. I'm like, and I know people who have very dramatic body language, and I wonder if some of that is just like you're training with people, and it's like, that's like communication between one another. And again, not like necessarily intentional, but validation of like, hey, what we're doing is really hard, which it is. And like, I think it's important to recognize that, and it's okay to seek that validation, but I think it's a funny way that we do it. And I catch myself doing it all the time. And well, not all the time, but anyway, interesting thought I had recently. So
No, Pat,
bit of a derail.
I'm curious on this just a little bit, because, you know, now that you're what's your new team name? The Golden Oldies.
Golden Oldies, yeah.
Golden Oldies, yeah. So as a, you know, I didn't say it, you did, an older athlete in the sport of CrossFit. Is this, let's say, like self-reflection or even like mid-workout reflection, post-workout reflection? Is this something that you've developed more of the longer you've been training? Was that something you've always had?
No, that's a good question. I think I've always had it to some degree. But I think I'm trying to always develop new tools to keep up. And I think it's getting harder, and like people are getting better, and I'm getting a little older, and it's not as easy as it once was to be good. Like, I think that when I'm look at where I'm at now, and like the level of, say, time and effort and commitment I'm putting into maintaining my level, if I had put similar amounts of time and effort in when I was 8 years younger, like might have had a different looking career. But it's hard to say. And you have to do what you can. Like at that period, I was still in school full time, and I had other barriers, but I think you're just always looking for some kind of edge to do things that maybe other people aren't, or recognize things that other people haven't yet, and try to use that to your advantage. And I've always been someone who's trying to beat the test. Like I'm looking for the way to work the least hard possible. Like, I want to perform well on the test, and I want it to be easy. And I'm convinced every time that there's a way to do this or approach it that you will finish and perform well, or potentially win the workout, and it's going to be easy. If you can just figure out what the trick is. Like, there's a trick here somewhere. And here's the punchline: is there isn't most of the time. It's going to be hard no matter what, because everybody's the people pushing is what makes it hard. Like, the test inherently isn't difficult. It's the pace you have to hold. It's the people pushing against you. So there is an easiest path, but it's still not easy. And so I've always been someone who's like, I'll spend a lot of time ruminating over different workouts when we have them announced, of just like, you know, where's the trap? Where's the trick? Where's the place that's going to be the most bang for your buck in terms of effort? And that's different for everybody depending on what your skill set is. But I do spend a lot of time reflecting on little things like that, and like I said, trying to find tricks or traps or whatever. And so part of that is like, yeah, I mean, a lot of the game is physical, and the game is played physically, but there's large mental components to it. And I think pieces that you can recognize and steal from other sport is super valuable. Like that type of thing, like the body language thing and a lot of that stuff, like that's enduro sport 101. Like that's like they do that and have been doing it forever. And what we do is like, we're a racing, like we are still a racing sport. So I think you can take notes from other racing sports and learn from that. And so my wife was a very competitive cross-country skier in her athletic career. And I've talked to her a lot about this kind of stuff. And my coach now trains triathlon, and we talk a lot about things like that. And just how you can break elastics or use things like that to your advantage to mentally break competitors. And so it's helpful. Like there's a lot to learn from a lot of sports. And I think that we get trapped sometimes just focusing on CrossFit. And I know that's kind of what's cool, even what you guys do. Like you focus on not necessarily in silos, but you've got different specialties that you can focus on that are going to translate skills over. So there's transference and mental components of skill as well, right? And so we always try to look for things like that. It's hard though. I think the more you learn, like sometimes the more you realize there is to learn, and also the more I read and learn about some of that stuff and race tactics and things like that, I recognize it when it's being used against me as well. And there are times when there's nothing you can do, and it's like watching the end game of a chess match. Like you're out there doing everything you can, and you're like, "Fuck, I'm done." They're like, this person's gonna catch me here because they played it better at like whatever point. But now you're too far down the road, and it's like I just can't. There's nothing that can be done at this point. So you just have to accept it sometimes, and it's and accept that it's also a game of many workouts over many days sometimes, and be like, hey, salvage where you can, make up points where you can, but you're not, everybody else is also playing the same game against you, right? So you're not always the guy that's in the driver's seat making the kill shot at the end of the workout. So sometimes you're the guy who's getting run over, and that's funny when you're actually recognizing it happening in real time, and you're like, yeah, shit. But that's sport for you.
Is there something different between Rogue and the games from your perspective? If you're looking at it from that perspective, that says, hey, I mean, your success at Rogue is evident, right? And obviously you've had great success at the games too. But do you look at Rogue as saying, the way that they program, there's something about this event that just fits into my wheelhouse, or do the events just end up working out in your favor? Do you look at those two events in a particular way when they come up in the schedule and say, hey, Rogue, just for whatever reason, fits better into the way that I'm going to attack this particular event?
I think Rogue does suit my skill set well. I think I'm pretty good at doing grunt work, and I have pretty good general work capacity, and it takes away some of the skills that I've performed poorly at, like some of the like swimming or biking hasn't been involved in it. So it basically say it's the games, except it wipes away my worst finish of the games. That's like a simple way to look at it. So obviously that is an advantage for me, but I think it depends too. It's a weird competition to predict too, Rogue, just because of the timing of it. I always find it's very funny and super stressful. Like we wrap up the games. I go on like a wedding bender for the last little bit of the summer of just like, I maybe catch 2 or 3 more weddings in the end of the season, and I take a month off. And then all of a sudden you're like, geez, it's, like this year, my brother's wedding was mid-September. I think we were done on like the 18th of September, maybe even later than that. And then came home, and I'm like, fuck, I got to be like kind of peaked in like 4 weeks. And I was like, shoot, okay, like I hope I have enough time to rebuild the ship here. And everybody's kind of doing the same thing. I don't think I'm alone in that, but you sort of come through this mini off season and then have to come back up for a mini peak. But everybody, I think, is starting a strength phase, which is still practical for the Rogue Invitational based on what the loading generally is. So you can kind of justify doing a little less conditioning and a little more strength training. And so you kind of come in like a weird limbo of like, I don't really know. I don't feel like I'm competition ready necessarily. Like I'm in good shape. Like I haven't lost all my game shape. I've kind of shifted gears. I've taken some time. I feel decently healthy, but it's a major event. So I don't know. I'm like, did anybody just not take any time off or come right in, just kept the fire lit and rolled right through? So I always find it's like mentally a tough one to get into. Like you come in with a lot of uncertainty, and then after, a couple of days of competition, you can see what the landscape is, and you're like, you get a little more comfortable like that. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is about it that tends to benefit me, I guess. But it's a fun event. I always like competing at Rogue, and I think that some of the outdoor elements benefit me. The introduction of new elements tends to benefit me as well, relative to my peers. I think I'm a pretty fast learner, and I'm good at general athleticism stuff. We do things like the over unders of the logs. We've done a couple years, and I'm pretty good at that stuff. I'm good at moving my body through space, and I think there are times when we have elements like that expose athletes who are really good CrossFitters, but not really good athletes. And so I have a good enough background that I can weather the storm and most of that stuff. So they generally are introducing 1 or 2 new things per competition. And if you're looking at 9 events and I've got like, 2 or 3 that benefit me like that, it's a lot relative to your peers. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I perform well there, but I also perform pretty well at the games across a long time too, right? So I don't think there's a significant difference. You probably could look at it as something as simple as like, if you just took my worst finish away from the games, it would probably mirror pretty closely.
I'm always fascinated because, CrossFit is still kind of figuring out its legs in terms of what a season looks like. I think, new competitions being added, which ones are the ones that people want to attend, and the number of peaks that you need to have within a particular season is really athlete dependent. But in the gymnastics world, we have world championships, we have national championships, and Olympic year, you have Olympic trials, and you kind of, it ends up being kind of an all year with World Cup, and there's no real downtime. And I don't know how it is with weightlifting, Mike, if there's kind of an all year season,
Mm-hmm.
but CrossFit seems to be working towards not really having very much downtime. If you have the games, you have the Open, which is less important for someone like yourself. Then you have Wodapalooza, you have Dubai, you have Rogue. And it seems like the peaks are fairly often. Like, do you feel like if you were to try to, like, say you're your younger self 8 years ago, I want to be able to compete as many as possible. Do you think that the season is structured in a way that it's feasible to attend many of these events? Or do you have to kind of pick and choose and say, I have 3 peaks in me. I have the games, I have Rogue, I have Wodapalooza. That's basically what I can do as an athlete and still have enough time to be able to, recover essentially.
I'm going to write some notes because I got some things to say on this. So I think there's a few ways to look at that. And I think, so part of it depends a little bit on, I would say this first, if I could just design the season, like stop everything, full stop, pick everything up, shuffle it, put it down. I think our vision of like off-season events is kind of dumb. Like, I think we have to look at things like the Wodapaloozas and the Rogues and things like that. Like, that's a major competition. Like, why don't we just make that part of a season and like make it run more linear, make the dates make sense now so that there's nothing that's kind of enticing athletes to come and do extra work in time where they should be recovering. I think it will be beneficial for longevity of athletes and development of athletes to just say like, hey, these 5-6 months, this 6-month period, there's 4 major competitions that are going to run as part of the season. And then you're going to have 6 months off where there isn't anything. So there's nothing to like draw people in as extra, at least nothing above a certain class, say, of competition. And then, or even if it was just different, it's like 8 months and 4 months or something like that, like a 4-month of just like true off season where people are all kind of taking time. That would be really cool because now you just get like, there's a weird prestige thing around off-season competitions and like the games and why does that exist? It just creates a weird clash. And I think there can be a better marriage of what we're doing there. I am a guy who's always competed a lot more than my peers. I think that competing is fun. I think that that's why I do it. I like sport. I don't want to I train by myself. I don't want to spend an extra 3 months by myself in my garage. Like, I'm pretty good company, but I don't want to spend all my time by myself. So I think that, to me, that a lot of people are very concerned about, again, because of this prestige factor. It's like, I'm not going to do off-season events because I gotta perform for the games and I gotta this. But you're kind of putting all your eggs in one basket. And then even mentally, that takes a toll of like, now all of a sudden, I better make bread at the games or else my season is toast. And it's sport. Like, you could get sick, you could get hurt, like anything can happen. And in a sport where the tests are constantly changing, nothing necessarily bad needs to happen. You could just kind of get a tough shake. You build some bad momentum. Your whole year is burned. And that's really tough for athletes that are trying to compete full time. Whereas let's say you go, I had a couple years ago, I went to Wodapalooza in January and I won it. And the prize was $100,000 that year. And I'm like, cool. Now, whatever happens for the rest of the year, I've got much less pressure on my year and I can kind of navigate this how I want now. And I think more people would probably benefit from making multiple touch points, not just as like earning opportunities for them as athletes, but that it takes the edge off of like what the games means now. And if you put all your eggs in one basket and you blow it, it can be a huge blow to your, identity as an athlete, to your brand, to your whatever. But like, let's say I compete a year and I'm like, I win Rogue, I come second at Wadapalooza, and then I go to the games and I take seventh. And it's like, well, that was a pretty good year. Like and people can you can hedge a little bit like that. And if we change the season in a way where it's not like games way up here, everything else down here, all of a sudden there's like a level off value. There's more people competing at all these other events. So the competition level comes up. So the prestige value of it, say, is higher because nobody's saying, you won that, but it's because these 4 guys weren't there. And it creates a bit more of a season. It's more fun for spectators to see best versus best more often. And it just, I think mentally would save athletes. Like I think I look at some of the people who've taken years off and sort of look at it as like they're getting burnt out. But I think a major piece of burnout is the high level of pressure that goes with competition. And there's just a little less pressure if you do it a little more often. You become more practiced and more seasoned, and all your eggs aren't in one basket. Like you have that hedging effect where like, okay, I may not win this set, but like, in 2 months, I'm going to be a little better and I get the better of these people there. And it's more of a game. And I think that then you would also have time for development. One of the problems that we have right now is that people don't, if you're a certain level, let's say you're trying to break into the semifinals level field, you can't compete and build competition skills and practice competition skills because every time you compete, it's derailing your training by like a month. And then, that means that in order to become competitive and meet my goal, I've got to not compete for like a full year so that I can build some strength, I can learn some skills, I can do some things and put some good training in, which, in a lot of cases at worst, or at best, I guess, is boring. But at worst, now you're missing a bunch of learning opportunities to build competition skills because that's worth a lot. And I think we see all the time, and I tell people all the time, like, I've been successful, but I'm not better than a lot of the other guys. Like physically, in terms of capabilities, I look at the things that people can do, the weights they can lift, the reps they can do. Like there's a lot of guys that I think are more physically gifted than I am, or more physically skilled than I am. But I'm pretty good at navigating a competition across 4 days and just managing the highs and lows that come with that. And our sport has a depressingly small amount of opportunities to learn those skills because maybe you compete 4 times in a year. And if you do that, you're a real go-getter. Most people compete twice, maybe. And like, that's just nothing. Like, and that's why I think you see some of the people who do best at things like that are the people who've come from full careers competing other sports, where like you take a guy who played a collegiate volleyball and they were playing tournaments every other weekend, every one of which is like elimination style. How many high pressure situations and decision-making opportunities do you have over the course of that? Do you have to deal with defeat? You deal with success. And it's just like, it makes you better at bouncing back from a loss, dealing with a hard hit and being able to get up and do it. It makes you better at managing success and not just like, I don't know, like not trying to like ride that too high and crashing and burning afterwards. So I think there's a lot that goes into that stuff. I think if we could do it a little better, it would help with development, where we gave people time in a year that was carved out to say like, hey, here's your growth period. Because like Dave, even for you, like, yeah, gymnastics is a bit year round, but the summer months, a lot of the time was like, that's skill building time. Like there wasn't a lot of major competitions in the summer, is there?
Well, you have your national championship, which the Worlds is normally October now. So you have national championship normally end of June, and then there's a world selection camp July. And then if you make Worlds, you go from July to October in preparation for championships.
Gotcha.
So you have a little bit of downtime after, you make the team to kind of like decompress, but it really is just a period enough to be able to prep for Worlds. And then after Worlds is probably your best time to really use as a skill building time, end of October.
So that's kind of what we're like right now. And I think that what that does is it means like you've got this grind period where you've got to get up to a certain level. And then once you hit that level, I don't need as much of that downtime to do big development because I'm already competing at a certain level. So I look at our structure right now and I'm like, hey, you know what? If you're me or, Roman or people like that, I don't need to spend a lot of time building skills because my baseline's already really high. I can do a maintenance level. I can polish some things. I can do some mini phases of training that are going to help me get a little better at certain things, but I don't need to like rebuild a big foundation. So right now, people need to take time to not compete to build the foundation. And then once you're at a certain level, you can kind of maintain cruising altitude and navigate those like 2-month off seasons, and that's like you're okay. It's more of like a mental reset than really a physical building process. And we're kind of in that situation right now. So like, is there a better way to do it? Maybe, but I think it requires a bit more of a marriage between what we look at as off-season events now and the game season, because the game season is like 8 months long for one competition. It's just it's too onerous for what it is. And if we just plant some of those events in there, or find a way to just create that window and be like, hey, yeah, it's 8 months, but there's now 4 events in those 8 months. And then you get 6 months of like some rebuild or some downtime and whatever. It maybe becomes a little better for development, a little more tenable. I think it's good at just giving people repeat opportunities to practice their skills in competition and stuff. And I think it just creates a more fun season where you see some of the best athletes actually competing against each other more often, instead of like just at the games, just at Rogue. You maybe get a half of them at Wodapalooza or something like that, or half at Madrid, but it's all separated. We're a bit scattered and fractured right now, and it's we'll see if it gets better. I don't know. I hold out hope always, but I try to keep high hopes and low expectations, and it helps me survive.
That's I think that's the right mentality to take. It sounds like, I mean, I think we all kind of dream about it a little bit, especially people that are into Formula One, is like this Grand Prix style of, CrossFit. If you have this season and you have these hallmark events and they're strategically located within this window, I think, like you said, you could probably imagine hitting that peak point and then kind of staying there for a few months, knowing that you have these different competitions to hit up and have all the potential to earn and place and make most use of the time.
Yeah, and there's challenges with that too. Like there's there's always going to be complications. I like the look of that system, and I think what's important is to try to get some voices from the development side too, right? Of like, hey, if you're someone who's quarterfinals level and you're trying to get to semis, or you're trying to get from semis to the games, I think what you do also need in sport is a pretty clear trajectory for development to get to the highest level. Like, what's that trajectory look like? Like if it's something like F1 where you're like, well, yeah, you would start at like in a karting circuit and then Formula 3 and 2 and 1 and whatever. But I think there needs to be an obvious trajectory, or else you lose the interest of people trying to build their way up. And that's why, and for me, it's easy for me to be like, yeah, competition at the highest level should look like this, but that's relevant to like less than 100 people. Yeah. Right. So I think it's like, yeah, I can say that, but I think it's very important to be able to service all sides of that thing. And I fully recognize my bias, and I love competition, and I'm a competitor, and that's where my expertise finishes. So I think that I'm not a competition planner. I'm not I can weigh in on little things that have to do with what I know, but I have to be a little careful with what I what I try to put out there as like, this is how it should be,
Well, are you working on this with like Brent and others in the athlete council? Like, is this a topic? And you seem to be a voice that wants to see positive change within the community. Are you trying to kind of lead the charge along with Brent with, the athletes having more of a voice when it comes to scheduling for the year and the way that competitions are structured, having more, ideas around what a competition is going to look like? Are you interested in having your voice kind of be heard at that level?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of work on that stuff. It's hard. I mean, I feel like it's a lot of soundboarding, and I think one of the biggest things we're trying to be sensitive to is how athletes of different levels feel, coaches, people like that, like people who are organizing events, if we have some ideas, hey, how does this sound on like every level of this discussion with all the various people who are involved with it? And then I think that CrossFit is fairly they're fairly content with what they're doing. And I think if we're going to try to shake that up at all or introduce something different, we have to present something that makes sense and is pretty fully thought out and pre-packaged. So we're trying to do that and come up with some good ways to make this work that's going to kind of marry their product with the greater competition world. Because right now, that's sort of the fracturing that's causing some complication. Is it's like CrossFit season and then like everything else season, like not even CrossFit necessarily because of licensing things, but it's like functional fitness competitions, CrossFit season. And then they just kind of coexist, but there's a little bit of conflict. And they're like, is there a way to just bring those two things together and be like, why are we operating in silos when we're kind of doing the same thing and we have the same interests? So we're working on it a little bit, and this is why, like I said, I have to be a little careful with my expertise, because the more people we talk to, and we've got other, like, lots of people involved in it, it becomes apparent how much you don't know pretty quickly. And I think that you have to sort of, it's a lot of extra reading and like writing documents and writing guidelines and like admin and calls and things like that to just try to make sure that things are good, so that at some point we can present a more cohesive structure that hopefully has some legs. I think the dream for guys like Brent and myself, who are, I'm going to be 34 next games, is we're looking at like the back nine here, right? Like I'm not looking like I'm going to compete for 10 more years. So what we want to try to do is leave some form of legacy that's helpful for other people, right? Like leave things better than you found them, leave some sort of framework or structure or guideline that helps young athletes come up and navigate their way through the space that we didn't really have. Like when we started, and even before us, you look at guys that are been in it a little longer than me, even guys like BKG and Yonikuski and guys like that. Like it was very Wild West, and which was kind of the appeal, I think, initially in the early days of CrossFit, is it was very against the grain, but there's no clear path of how to do things and where to go and where to look for help. And like, how do I even begin with trying to get sponsors or deal with travel to go to major international competitions, or, get an agent, or like all these various things that now we have 10 years of information and you can kind of help to just send people in the right direction. At the end, in a perfect world, we would have a really cool competition structure that makes sense and can last, for 10, 20 years without a lot of fiddling. But for now, a lot of it is, we have a lot of educational assets that we've built for athletes coming up in the space who just have questions, from everything from like drug testing protocols to online competition appeals, all that kind of stuff, to just help people have the best shot they can possibly have and create as level a playing field as you possibly can. But yeah, the ultimate dream would to be a part of like creating a cool structure would be awesome. But it's interesting, there's a lot of people who I think don't really care or don't need it to change or want it to change. But I think for our money, if the ecosystem is going to continue to grow, we need to create a better product of competitions that puts best versus best more often, because that's what people want to see as spectators, and that's what sponsors want to be attracted to, and that's what's going to generate revenue, and it's going to make the thing actually self-sustaining. So we got to talk some people into it. I've always been pretty happy to compete more often. I probably compete 2 to 3 times more per year than most of my peers, and I'm doing just fine. So I'm trying to be a model citizen here of like what we can be doing and what we should be doing. And hopefully we can do some of that in the future.
The sport needs more of you guys. It's such a critical part for the next generation that don't realize how important it is to have that structure if they want to create something sustainable. So what you and Bren and the rest of the athletes that are really proactive about this side of things and what you guys are doing while you're still competing, I think it's just such a valuable asset that, anyone that's either oblivious or working against it does not really have long-term goals in mind with it. So I applaud what you guys are doing, and it's great to see that you guys are so forward thinking with it. I have one technical question here, just curiosity, and then Mike, you can jump in there. But I'm curious, and again, social media is our best glimpse into your guys' lives. You know what I mean? As athletes, and all of our lives in terms of what we're doing on a regular basis. And sometimes we have a tendency to we glamorize the end result. And, we put out there crossing the finish line and lifting the heavy weights and showing the end result most of the time. But the real work is done with the shit that you end up not putting up on social media, the nuance to every turn that sucks. And, that 2K row is probably not something, and you laying on the ground is not something that you wanted to share with the world. But you posted something recently that I think is interesting. You posted a video of you doing some swinging ring pull-ups, which are an exercise that we, recommend a lot of athletes that are starting out to understand timing and understand some important concepts when it comes to a good muscle up. And from our perspective, coming from our sport, and Mike, you can speak to this too, but we spend so much time on these little things in gymnastics world. The amount of time that we spend doing things like static dips and push-ups and these things that people kind of gloss over is really important. And the question revolves around, how much time do you spend as an athlete at this point on working on foundational components, building, the things that the everyday person out there probably needs to see, but doesn't get a glimpse into because social media doesn't really make it look pretty. Are you spending a good amount of time on those foundational things like swinging ring pull-ups?
It depends a little bit on time of year. This was like post games. I was doing lots of stuff like that. On an average day, though, I think people would be shocked at how little kind of CrossFit I do in an average day. And my coach, Michelle, with DecaComp, she's always operated that way. And I've told this to people from my gym who've been interested in trying to do the same programming that I'm on. She's very accessory heavy. And I think we do a lot of specific work to strengthen specific positions, like just lots of accessory work. And per day, yesterday I had one CrossFit workout for like 4 hours of training probably. So a lot of it is we do our weightlifting, in isolation. We do positional work for that stuff. Same with the gymnastics stuff. I tend to separate. One day is more weightlifting bias, one day is more gymnastics bias. And then my second sessions of the day are usually like conditioning, whether like running or machines or things like that. So if I have like 5-6 pieces in a session, one of them's probably like strength, like squatting, or like strict pull-up stuff, weighted pull-up, whatever, if it's a gymnastics day. And there's probably 3 to 4 that are accessory, and then one that's like a CrossFit workout. And even, when I had a friend who was asking for some help with some gymnastic stuff, and I gave him a bunch of that, exactly like static dip holds, that kind of stuff. That's just positional strength that's going to create confidence in positions that people don't realize they need. Mm-hmm. And I even just on a warm-up level, for me to warm my shoulders up now, I've got one kind of bad shoulder, and like I do ring swings and things just like I would have when I was competing in gymnastics, like a few 3 sets of just basic ring swings, get long, get loose, kind of feel the rotation in the shoulders, do 3 sets of 10 ring swings and just like feel how much better my body feels to just do some of that before you crank out a few muscle ups. So I think I've always had a bit of an understanding of that based on my sports background, but also my coach, fortunately, is quite good at that, because I'll be honest, nowadays, I have a lot of balls I keep in the air on an average day. And if it's not on the sheet, sometimes I just don't do it. Like I will do every single time, every day of the week, all year long. I will do every piece of training that is on the page, but I will probably not do anything more than that. So I've had very frank conversations with my coach that like, hey, look, I'm whatever. My shoulder's been bugging me lately. I need to spend a little more time warm up there. Can you program a little like warm up, or even just write it out as like, hey, 10 minutes of this for shoulder activation? Because then I'll do it. But if you don't, and the first thing is like, it's got handstand walks or something in it, like I'm not going to warm my wrists up. I'm not going to warm my shoulders up. I know I've got a limited time window, and I'm just going to start doing it. And I'm going to let the first 2 sets warm me up. And I have a bad habit of doing that just because of the way I've had to manage time over the last 10 years. But I think that, we try to focus as much as we can on those things. And you're right. It's little things do make a big difference. And I think that when we get to a higher level, they make a bigger difference. It's really important foundationally to learn the basics. But when everybody gets to a certain level, or the skill level is big, to gain an advantage over anybody, you have to narrow your scope significantly. So you're starting to look at smaller and smaller details that are going to separate you from another athlete. And so it's usually little things like that, very slight technical proficiencies. And the easiest way to navigate that is if you can ever get the right person to just deal with it first and then build up slowly, that's the best. Usually what happens is we move a little too fast. You get to the end game where you're like, hey, I'm pretty competitive with all these guys. How do I gain an edge? And then your coach is like, well, you got to go all the way back there and fix this position. And then you have to go back and relearn a little bit, which can be frustrating when you're like, well, I can already do 20 muscle ups. Like, why do I have to go work on like this? And it feels lame or whatever, but those are the realities. Is like the people who have really strong foundations never have to work backwards. But that's what it is. A lot of times going back to like very basic positional stuff, and those things just, I don't know, that stuff always works. Like basic bodybuilding stuff too, like that works. It's good for your joints. It's good for tendon health. It's good for a lot of stuff. And I have a like clinical education as well. So I have a fairly nuanced view on training and rehab and all that kind of stuff. So I try to let that creep in and guide my decisions a little bit as well. But we spend lots of time on that. And I think those things will never go out of style. And it just should always be some part of your training, and probably a bigger part than people think.
I love it. Thank you. Every listener out there, please listen to those wise words from Pat. I think it's such an important piece that we try to get across. And social media, unfortunately, doesn't highlight those important pieces for the everyday athlete. And we don't want people to get caught in a situation where they have to, they do something for years and then suddenly someone says, hey, you know what, that would get much better if you went back into the foundation again and start over. And it's just frustrating for a lot of people. So wherever you're at, look at the foundations, think about the importance of those accessory pieces, slow things down, tempo, pause work, do it. It's going to help you. Take your medicine, eat your vegetables, however you want to look at it. But it'll make everybody be able to last longer and be better within the sport.
It's also never too late to go do it, right? Like when my shoulder was bugging me lots, I was doing lots of overhead. And then I just said, you know what would help is if I did like some downward dog and some basic handstand holds, like nose to wall for like, if I just accumulate like 5 minutes every day I train, I bet you my shoulder feels better in like 3 weeks. And yeah, it does. Like you can go back and do stuff like that. And the hard part about CrossFit is there's so much to do. And when we're looking at trying to keep so many things going, and that's why splitting days where I have more biased days to gymnastics or weightlifting or whatever, or phases of the year where you're like, hey, regroup after competition season's done. I need to focus on a gymnastics foundation. This next 2 months is going to be dedicated mostly to that. And then just, commit to it and spend the time, because it's hard to keep everything up at once unless you're going to spend 6 hours in the gym a day, which most people don't have. But you can do little things all the time, and even just little home care stuff. Like if you're watching TV, there's little things you can do with your wrists and ankles and little positions that are going to be beneficial too. So, basics are super important, and it's never too late to do it, but you do have to carve out some space.
Awesome. We didn't pay you to say that. Mike,
Pat,
go for it.
Pat, it sounds like if you just persist until you prevail, everything will be okay.
That's right. Stubbornly, again, in spite of yourself, persist.
I love it. What do you got coming up? You got big competition coming up in a couple of months. What are you looking forward to over the next, after the holidays?
I got action coming for the next little bit from all angles. So
you're gonna be close to me in a couple of weeks.
Where are you at?
Well, currently I'm in a forest in the middle of Ohio, but I will soon be back in Europe with my wife. We live in Germany, and you're going to be, I think, in the UK pretty soon, right?
Yeah. We're going to be in Birmingham for the Fit Fest I think it's like the 8th to the 11th of December.
Mm-hmm.
So we leave for there on Wednesday coming up here on the 6th, and then that's going to be fun. That's just kind of team stuff, a bit of like all-star game kind of format. Yeah, we got a bit of a structure. Yeah, we got a bit of a structure, and it's kind of fun. It looks like not everybody does everything. You can kind of pick certain athletes to send out for different workouts. Like you might need 3 people, so you just pick 3 to throw at this one.
This is your first time. This is your first time at this event.
Yeah, so I did strength and depth years ago, 2018 or 19, when it was still like a large team event, teams of 12 or something.
Yep.
before they did sanctionals and stuff like that. And this is sort of going to be similar to that format wise, where like you break your team up, you do a little thing. It's going to be very fun. So we're looking forward to that. It's gonna be cool. My wife and kid are coming out for that too. So we're going to do a little holiday afterwards, spend some time in London. And then I get a very short week or so at home where I try to work a little bit. And then we're going to go visit my family in the mountains for a week. And then I get another short week or so at home. And then I'm going to go to Wadapalooza in early January. And I'm going to do both divisions there, the individual and team. So you mentioned earlier, my team is going to be the Golden Oldies with Will Morad and Travis Mayer. So that'll be fun. We're combined age of 100. So we're going to see if we can lay the smackdown on some young guys. But that'll be a lot of fun.
It's funny because Dave and Jordan together are also combined age of 100. So
hey, Mike, that's a zinger right there.
Meanest thing I'll say all day.
We're looking forward to that. It's gonna be cool. I like those guys are great, easy to get along with, and that's a fun competition. So after that, I'm gonna chill for a bit, and then we're gonna just nest for the baby, I think. So try to just stay put, work a little bit, train at home, and get ready kind of for the open and get ready for the baby. So action packed travel for the next 2 months, and then probably just really laying low until probably semifinals. I bet I don't do anything meaningful until then.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll at least be able to cheer for you in person when we come to Wadapalooza this year. Good luck at the comps. And obviously, all the best of luck in the world for the newborn on its way for you and your wife and the fam.
Yeah, thanks so much. We're welcoming tips if anybody has any.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Every book, everything we've been told, it's like fly by the seat of your pants. You just figure it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Day by day. Like no book really gets you ready for it. So
nope, nobody knows. They're all just making it up.
Exactly.
Great.
Well, where can people follow along, man, with the journey? Where can people find you on social?
Best thing is my Instagram is just at P Vellner. That'll be the best place to keep track of what I'm doing day to day. And then I do a little bit of stuff on YouTube, but it's pretty infrequent these days. So I would say, probably just Instagram.
All right. Awesome. I know we got your quick hitting questions last time you were on, but any books you're reading recently or movies that are worth checking out?
Ooh.
If you don't have one, Pat, I have a good recommendation for all of you guys too, but I'll let you go first.
Okay. Let me hear yours because I'll think for a second.
All right. So has actually any of you, but you specific, since you're the countryman, seen the new film on BlackBerry?
No, I haven't, but I heard it was pretty good.
So good. Yeah. So you definitely, it like, just now I'm very distrustful of Canadians. I used to think that you were all the sweetest in the world. And then this movie just completely changed my perspective.
Oh no, it exposed us, the true
That's
us.
right. That's right. It's like, oh my gosh, they're ruthless.
Damn. We thought we had that kind of hidden there.
Yeah, no, they blew it out with this. They blew it out with this movie.
Oh, somebody airing us out. What kind of reading do you guys like? Like nonfiction, fiction?
Whatever you're into. Most of the time people give us like, I don't know, self-help books kind of a thing.
We've had some interesting though. Who was the one that gave us like a kind of a sci-fi fictional book recently that was good? I can't remember now. Yeah. Give us the weirdest one you got, Pat.
I'm not a big self-help guy. I kind of feel like I feel like people who don't need self-help read self-help books to validate themselves. So they can read like, hey, they're like, yeah, I'm already doing that. Awesome. I'm killing it. I'm currently reading a series that's like a hockey series. Written by a guy from Sweden. Yeah, it's good, but I wouldn't say it's escapist reading, but I wouldn't say that's a groundbreaking one. I read a sci-fi called Rendezvous at Rama recently. That was just like, it's a Lewis C. Clark sci-fi. It's like kind of a famous one, but very very good. And
all right.
I'm trying to remember what I read just before that because I feel like I just gobbled one up right before that, but I can't remember what it was. Let me just see if I can. Hopefully, this doesn't break my Wi-Fi. But we have too many bookshelves. I got to go look at the other bookshelf.
This is what you get for a reader. See, this is some real thought into the answer. I'll just throw in mine because I know my team is sick of hearing me talk about it.
Oh my gosh!
I just I'm finishing up the new Walter Isaacson Elon Musk book. the bio on Musk.
Oh yeah.
It's worth a read if you guys are interested in just the many layers and dimensions that are, the real
I
life
think
Iron Man.
I think I saw that one at Costco.
Oh,
Oh, you know what? Yeah. So I read this book called The Rider. Um, you guys will probably all have some appreciation of this. Let me just make sure there's not another one. Yeah, I think that's fine. So I read a book called The Rider, which is the author is Tim Krabbe, Krabbe accent aigu. He's a Flemish guy or from a Dutch guy, I guess. He is like a cyclist, pro cyclist, and he wrote a book, and basically it chronicles an entire race. It's written first person perspective of this guy throughout an entire like stage race that's like 150-kilometer race or something like that. Um, and just like everything he was thinking about over the course of this race, like what the mental process is like around breakaway groups and all these things like that. And he's quite a good writer, but it's just like, I feel like anybody who's competed in sports in general, it's such an interesting like break into psyche of an athlete to like read certain things, and you can just be like, I totally get that. Some things you can see that are fairly specific to racing sports, but very engaging book of just like how he's trying to like lose
This one,
riders,
right?
like
there
play.
it is, Ryder.
There you go. Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Great book about just like, yeah, how they're trying to break each other, like how they're whatever, like the mental warfare that goes on, like the internal turmoil that goes on. Like very cool book. And it's got one of the best lines in it that I've read in a long time. Is when he's talking about there's a guy who's he's basically like never pulling the group. And the way cycling works, you have people who will pull the group and then you change.
Mm-hmm.
And he's getting pissed off at this guy. And then talking about how I think the guy who's doing that is doing it strategically and like not being pressured by the group. And I think that person's father or someone was also a famous rider who is notorious for doing that same thing. And he's like talking about how he's like, this is just like their generational like bullshit. And he's like, I think the guy's dad had a quote that was like, a good rider will lick his opponent's plate clean before getting started on his own, which is just like amazing to me. It's just like a genius line.
Opportunist.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, I'm gonna burn you out and ride you until you're dead, and then I'm gonna leave your body behind. And it's like there's a culture in that sport that like you don't do that. And like a group will try to drop you if you try to do it, but they like couldn't drop this rider, and they're just like everyone's getting so annoyed. And then it's like you're just living in their head, right? Like it's a very interesting book about all that stuff, all the tactics, and like what it takes to become a high level rider, and what those rides actually look like when you watch a stage of the Tour de France that's like 6 hours, 7 hours on the bike. Like what do they go through during that thing? And it's cool. It's very cool. So anyway, that was a fun one that I read. It's a short read too, actually. It's a pretty easy read. So
We got to add it.
yeah, have fun with that one.
Thank you. I want to throw in a TV show that I think everyone should watch, especially if you are a small business owner out there. I'm almost done with the second season of The Bear. And if you haven't watched the first season, absolutely watch it. But the second season, episode 6 is the one that I think everyone talks about as like a standalone episode that's worth watching. It's the cast is incredible. But episode 7 is incredible. Episode 7, the season is amazing. It's one of the best shows out there, but episode 7 is very, very unique in the way that it's shot, the way that it's done, some of the messages that come across, and it just hit me really hard last night watching that episode. So I would highly, highly recommend the show, The Bear. Check it out.
You know what I watched recently? We started watching. Who's the main guy in The Bear? What's his name?
I don't even know his name. I don't
know. You know who I'm talking about though?
Like Michael Allen something or other.
Right.
He looks like Gene Wilder.
Right. Yeah. Totally. A young Gene Wilder. You're right. Wow. I actually never put that together. That's really, really astute. So we started watching Shameless, which is like
oh yeah, he's in Shameless.
Yeah. And he's one of the kids in Shameless. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a guy who's like crushing it in The Bear right now.
Jordan loves Shameless. That's what it was.
Yeah. Oh yeah, terrific. We're like one season in, but we just started watching it not that long ago. Terrific show. But anyway.
Anyone, another one to add to the list. Well, Pat, thanks for the time, man. It's always great to chat and catch up, especially with all you got on your agenda, on your plate right now. We appreciate you taking the time today to chat with us.
It was my pleasure, guys. Good to catch up with everybody.
Absolutely. For all the listeners out there, please be sure to head over to powermonkeyfitness.com for services and upcoming events. Check out our Instagram pages for regular teaching and technical content at Power Monkey Fitness, at Dave Durante, and at Mike Service. On behalf of Power Monkey Fitness, we're your hosts. I'm Dave Durante with my co-host Mike Service. And until next time, thank you all for listening.